I texted my family, just got the promotion. No one replied. 2 hours later, my aunt posted, proud of our little investor. It was my brother. I funded his first year. I went home, shut down his account, pulled my name from the LLC, and cancelled the lease on his office space. Then I left a box on his desk, every invoice I'd covered, and a note that said, time to self-fund. By morning, 73 missed calls. All of them begging. I texted the family group chat at 12:06 p.m. It was short, straight to the point. I just got a promotion. No emojis. No unnecessary fluff. I even debated whether to add a period. I figured that would be enough to spark something. Maybe a quick congrats from my mom, a thumbs up from my dad, or one of those fire emojis my cousin always throws around like confetti. Instead, silence. At first, I thought maybe the group chat was glitching. I even sent a test message, can you guys see this? Nothing. No little typing bubbles. No new messages. I waited, refreshing the chat like a lunatic. 10 minutes. Half an hour. An hour. Still nothing. Exactly 2 hours and 11 minutes later, my aunt finally wrote something. I'm proud of our little investor. I read it again, then again. It wasn't for me. She meant Jesse. My younger brother Jesse, who supposedly built his business from scratch. Jesse, who recently posted a photo of himself at some networking event shaking hands with a startup founder like they were equals. Jesse, who bragged about taking risks and betting on himself, when the only bet he ever won was having me as his older brother. I financed his entire first year. Office space, legal paperwork, graphic design, website hosting, even the damn coffee machine in his office. When he needed a business card printer, I paid for expedited shipping. When the LLC paperwork required a second name, I added mine so he wouldn't get flagged. I didn't want credit. I just wanted to see him make something of himself. Apparently, he forgot who made it possible. That night, I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I drove to his office with a different kind of clarity in my head. I parked 2 blocks away and walked, thinking maybe I was overreacting. Maybe he didn't mean to take the spotlight, maybe my family just forgot to check their phones. But when I opened the door to that office and saw his desk, his framed certificate, the big whiteboard with plans he never told me about, I knew exactly what I had to do. I went home and closed our shared account. I filed the paperwork to remove my name from the LLC. I called the leasing company and canceled the office contract, since it was in my name. Then I boxed everything up, paperwork, receipts, screenshots of our old texts about money, everything that proved where the foundation of his empire came from. I drove back to his office and dropped it on his desk. 1 box, 1 note. Time for self-financing. I didn't expect a thank you. I didn't even expect a fight. I just wanted out. The next morning, my phone exploded. 73 missed calls. 44 from Jesse, the rest from a chaotic mix of family. Texts came in waves. What did you do? Jesse says he's locked out of the account. Why would you do this to your own brother? My mom even called 3 times in a row, which she never does unless someone's in the hospital. Not a single one of them asked about my promotion. They didn't even mention it. I sat on the edge of my bed, reading through every message, every missed call, and I realized something that should have hit me years ago. In my family, Jesse was the golden child. And I was just the wallet keeping the lights on. That was the day things started to shift. And I was only getting started. Jesse went into panic mode after the cutoff. I watched it happen in real time. One by one, his illusions started cracking. The office lease termination hit first. He didn't read the fine print about how fast it would close when only 1 signature was needed. Then came the web hosting suspension, since that was on my card. He tried to get a new business account without me, but his credit was too thin. No history, no approvals. He started texting me weird questions like, what's the password to the vendor site again? And do you remember when the LLC renewal is due? I ignored every message. I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd take the hint. Step back, own it. But instead, he spun a different version to the family. The dinner invite came 3 days later from my mom. She said it was a low-key get-together. Just the immediate family and a few cousins. I already knew Jesse had something planned. It was too soon, too sudden, and way too polite. I debated skipping, but something told me I needed to be there. Saturday night, I pulled up to the house and sat in the car for a few minutes. I had nothing rehearsed, nothing planned, but I was done playing support. Inside, everything looked normal. Pot roast in the oven, my uncle yelling at the football game in the living room, my aunt bringing out one of those fruit salads no one ever finishes. Jesse was at the kitchen counter with a beer, holding court. Smiling. Relaxed. Like he hadn't spent the last week unraveling. We sat down for dinner, and it started as expected. My mom asked if anyone had tried that new Greek place downtown. My cousin bragged about getting promoted at her marketing job. Then Jesse took his chance. He didn't say my name. Not once. But he laid it on thick. Said this past week has been a real lesson in independence. Talked about learning to pivot when you can't rely on people anymore. He even threw in something about how some people show their true colors when money's involved. And the table? They nodded. Ate their salad. One of my uncles even said, "That's the grind, man." That was the moment I decided to speak. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I paid for everything, I said. Jesse's entire business. The office, the LLC, the web designer, even the furniture in that space he keeps posting photos of. I didn't say anything before because I didn't think I needed to. But if we're talking about independence, maybe that should start with being honest. For a few seconds, it was dead quiet. No chewing. No clinking of forks. Just silence. Then my dad leaned back and said, "So what? You're his brother. That's what family does." That hit harder than I expected. Not because it was cruel, but because it was honest. That was the role they'd carved out for me. The fixer. The quiet one who just did what needed doing and never asked for credit. No one else said anything. Not my mom. Not even my cousin who once borrowed money from me to get her car fixed and never paid it back. They just moved on. Like I'd said I'd spilled a drink, not unveiled years of financial backing. Jesse didn't even look up. I stayed until dessert. Not because I wanted to, but because I wanted them to sit with it. To know I was done pretending. I didn't try to explain further. I didn't list receipts or show texts or drag anyone into a confrontation. I just existed there, finally seen, even if they didn't want to see me. And when I left, Jesse followed me out to the driveway. "You embarrassed me," he said. "You made me look small in front of them." I didn't reply. I got in the car and drove off. He had no idea how much smaller things were about to get. The next few weeks were quiet. Not from Jesse. He was loud in every way he could be without talking to me. Instagram stories about rebuilding, cryptic tweets about real ones versus fake ones, and a LinkedIn post so dramatic I screenshotted it for later. Something about how true entrepreneurs rise when support disappears. He included a photo of himself holding a coffee cup with a caption, "Grinding. Solo." He had no idea how fast everything was about to collapse. First, the landlord called him about the security deposit. Since the lease had been under my name, and I had officially cancelled it, he didn't qualify to renew it under his own. They gave him 2 weeks to vacate the office. I knew, because the landlord CC'd me in the email by accident. Jesse didn't know I saw it. Then came the payments he couldn't make. The client invoices that stopped getting paid because the system was still linked to my accounts. Vendors started reaching out to him directly, asking where their money was. One even emailed me by mistake, assuming I was still handling his books. I replied with 2 words, "No longer." I thought maybe that would be the worst of it. That eventually, he'd call me, apologize, and ask for help, not money, just advice. But Jesse didn't do apologies. He went to our parents instead. My mom called me on a Wednesday afternoon while I was at work. "Jesse's in a tough spot," she said. "He told us you pulled out everything all at once." I told her I didn't pull out. I stopped carrying. There was a pause. Then she said, "Well, maybe just help him get back on his feet. You two used to be close." I wanted to ask her when she last asked me how I was doing. When she last cared about what I needed. But I let it go. Told her I was busy and hung up. A week later, Jesse moved out of the office. He posted a video thanking his community for sticking with him through the hard times. Filmed it in a Starbucks. Said he was pivoting to something new, something leaner, more agile. Behind the scenes, I was still getting emails. More bills. A bank notification about a chargeback. I forwarded them all to him, no note, just the raw reality of the mess he'd made. And then came the real hit. A woman named Denise emailed me. She was a local supplier Jesse had worked with. She said he owed her nearly $4,000. Said he told her I was the investor and that I'd cover it. I read the email 3 times. It wasn't the amount that got me. It was that he still, even after everything, had no problem using my name. Still assumed I'd pick up the tab. I sent one reply: "You'll need to speak with Jesse directly. I'm no longer involved." No explanation. No apology. Just the truth. That night Jesse called. Not to apologize, but to yell. He said I was ruining him. That the timing was unfair. That I'd set him up to fail. I let him talk. I didn't say much. He hung up without saying goodbye. The next day, my cousin messaged me. "Uncle Ron says you're being cruel. Says you're not acting like family." Then she added, "They all think Jesse's just going through a rough patch. They don't get why you're doing this." I didn't reply. They never saw the late nights, the bills I paid, the way Jesse bragged to strangers while I footed the back end. They never noticed when I struggled. Only when I stopped helping. And soon, they'd all see what Jesse looked like without a safety net. 2 months later, Jesse's whole image had cracked. Not in one big, public crash, more like a slow, invisible crumble. First, his social media got quieter. No more flashy posts or vague quotes about the grind. The stories stopped too. Eventually, his website went dark. His business email returned a generic error. His LinkedIn changed titles from founder and CEO to nothing. I kept waiting for someone in the family to say something about it. Just once. To ask what happened, or maybe even admit they'd been wrong. But all I got were whispers from cousins, 1 or 2 hesitant questions from an uncle. No one said a word directly. Because if they acknowledged it, they'd have to admit what kept him afloat this whole time. I got the first call from a vendor he owed about 3 weeks in. A woman named Julie. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered because I thought it might be work. "Hi, is this Kyle? I'm trying to follow up on an unpaid invoice for Jesse's project. You were listed as the secondary contact?" I told her the truth. That I was no longer involved. She was polite about it, but I could hear it, the sigh on the other end. She wasn't the first person Jesse had dropped. I'd been that safety net before, catching all the things he left unfinished. The worst part wasn't watching Jesse's fall. It was realizing how many people I had unknowingly held up just by standing behind him. Eventually, I started getting messages from Jesse himself again. First, cold and clipped. Just links to unpaid bills. A screenshot of a bounced payment. Then came the guilt trips. "This is what you wanted, right? Glad you finally got me out of the way. This is on you now." I didn't reply to any of them. It was surreal seeing him blame me for his failure, like my withdrawal of support had caused the whole thing to implode. Like I'd built a house of cards and he was shocked when it collapsed after I stopped holding it up. A few weeks later, I heard from my mom that Jesse had moved back home. She dropped it casually, like she was telling me the weather. No mention of how it got to that point. No mention of the failed business or the trail of unpaid bills he'd left behind. "He's figuring things out," she said. "He just needs a little time." That weekend, my dad called. He asked if I could talk to Jesse. Said he was a little lost. I knew what he meant. They wanted me to fix it again. Quietly, like before. I said I'd talk to him. We met at a diner. Neutral ground. He looked tired. Worn out in a way I hadn't seen before. I waited for him to start, but he just sat there picking at a napkin. I told him I wasn't here to refund anything. That I wasn't going to make calls or write checks or vouch for him again. I told him if he wanted help, I'd help him apply for a job. Not a CEO role. Just a real job. A friend of mine ran logistics at a warehouse and they were hiring. Solid pay, health benefits, real work. He didn't take it well. "After everything I've done, you want me moving boxes in a warehouse? I want you doing something real." That ended the conversation. He didn't take the job. A week later I heard from my mom again, this time more direct. She said Jesse felt abandoned. That he thought I had turned on him when he needed me most. That he was embarrassed and couldn't show his face around the family. And here's the thing, they agreed with him. To them, I wasn't the guy who kept his business alive. I was the one who let him fall. Who exposed the truth. Who made him face it. I went from being invisible to being the villain. The guy who said no. He started telling people I resented him. That I was jealous. Said I'd been waiting to sabotage him. And somehow, that version stuck. Even the people who didn't believe it didn't speak up. Easier to nod than challenge it. The irony is, I didn't do anything. I just stopped doing everything. And now that no one else could hold the weight, the whole story fell apart. The best part? He still doesn't get it. Not really. A month passed, maybe a little more, and the calls from my parents slowed down. Jesse had stopped texting altogether. From what I heard, he was still at home, still unemployed, still clinging to the idea that something would come through. I stopped checking his socials. At some point, he deleted everything. Then I got a message from someone I didn't know. It was a Saturday morning. His name was Aaron. Said he used to share an office space near Jesse back in the early days. He wanted to meet. I ignored it at first. I assumed he was another burned contact, looking for someone to cover Jesse's damage. But the second message caught me. This isn't about money. It's about a project your brother was building. And it has your name all over it. I agreed to meet him at a little cafe on the edge of the city. He was younger than I expected, a bit scruffy, carried a laptop bag and an actual blueprint rolled under one arm. We sat outside, and he jumped right in. Said Jesse had been working on a partnership, something that involved logistics software tied to small businesses. Said it actually had potential. Real backing, even a demo that impressed some local investors. But Jesse couldn't deliver because he overpromised, again. Then Aaron pulled out the blueprint. It was old, creased, and covered in Jesse's handwriting. And mine. I recognized my own notes. It was from when we were brainstorming one night after his first failed pitch. I had drawn up the structure for how the supply chain integration could work, just rough ideas over pizza and beer. I never thought he kept it. Never thought he tried to pass it off. He told the investors he had a CTO, Aaron said. He meant you. Apparently, Jesse had pitched me as part of the company. Used my resume. My certifications. Even a fake Gmail account tied to my name to make it look like I was part of email chains. And it got him a meeting. I didn't know whether to laugh or be furious. Aaron told me the investors backed out when Jesse couldn't deliver. But the framework, the thing I sketched up in a notebook, was still solid. They were still interested. But not in Jesse. In me. What are you saying? I asked. Aaron pulled up a tab on his laptop. It was an email. An invite. They wanted to talk. They remembered the pitch, and now that the dust had settled, they were curious about the guy behind it. Me. I walked out of that cafe buzzing. For the first time, it wasn't about revenge or proving anything to my family. This was mine. My work. My design. My name, finally used for something that wasn't just cleaning up someone else's mess. I didn't tell Jesse. I didn't tell anyone. I kept it to myself. A week later, I flew to Austin for the meeting. Just me, my laptop, and the blueprint I had sketched a year earlier without thinking it mattered. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't a startup with a ping-pong table and an espresso machine. But it was real. They offered to bring me in as a systems consultant, with room to grow into a bigger role if the project scaled. I said yes. It felt like a different life. Days filled with actual work that mattered. People who didn't care about last names or holiday dinners or who played the hero at Thanksgiving. Just skill. Just vision. And the best part? No one there had even heard of Jesse. Back home, I started getting texts again. Jesse had found out I was working with the same group he had pitched. One of the investors probably mentioned it in passing, not realizing the drama behind it. He sent me a message. You stole my idea. I stared at it for a long time. Then I replied, you stole my name. I left it at that. The family didn't know where I was for a while. I kept it vague. Said I was consulting, which was technically true. But I needed space. Not just distance, but breathing room. Somewhere no one could twist the story. Jesse's fall was complete now. The calls had stopped. The silence was real. And I was far away, finally building something of my own, on the ashes of the story he tried to write without me. 6 months later I came home. Not because I missed anyone. Not because I felt some emotional pull to reconnect. It was just time. The project in Austin was stable. We'd landed a distribution partnership that put everything on track to expand. I'd moved from consultant to lead strategist. For the first time in years, I wasn't just reacting, I was building. But I had this itch. Not curiosity, not revenge, just a sense of closure. I wanted to see the fallout. What had really changed, if anything? So I flew back and drove straight to my parents' place. My mom didn't know I was coming. When she opened the door, she froze. She hugged me like nothing had ever happened. Inside, the same furniture, the same paintings, the same smell of whatever she always baked on Sundays to pretend everything was fine. Jesse wasn't there. I didn't ask where he was. I didn't care. Dinner felt mechanical. No real questions about what I'd been doing, just polite nods and vague "good for yous." Then my dad mentioned Jesse was working part-time at a friend's auto shop. Just helping out. Nothing official. "He's trying," he said. "You know how it is." No, I didn't. Jesse had never really tried. He just waited for other people to make things happen for him. That night, I stayed at a hotel. I didn't want to sleep under the same roof. But the next morning, Jesse showed up in the lobby. He looked older. Not in a dramatic way, just drained. Like someone who finally understood how long real days felt when there's no one left to carry you. "I heard you're back." I nodded. He sat down, stared at the floor for a while, then said, "I didn't think it'd fall apart like that." I let the silence stretch. "I didn't mean for it to get ugly," he added. "You were always better at the real stuff. I thought if I acted like I was already there, I'd eventually get there." I believed him. Not that it excused anything, but it was probably the most honest thing he'd ever said to me. "I got offered something in Dallas," I said. "They want me to build the next phase of the project out there. Full-time." He blinked. "That's big." I nodded. Then I did something that surprised even me. I told him I could put in a word with one of the vendors we worked with. They needed people and logistics. Not startup glitz, not CEO glory. Just real work. Paychecks. A chance to earn, not pretend. He didn't answer right away. Just stared out the window. Eventually, he said, "I'll think about it." That was it. No big reconciliation. No dramatic moment of brotherly redemption. Just that. A week later, I flew back to Dallas. Got a text from Jesse a few days later. I took the job. No thank you. No apology. Just that. And honestly, it was enough. I learned something through all of it. Some people aren't evil. They're just addicted to shortcuts. They think being loved means being rescued. That loyalty means silence. That blood means debt. I broke that cycle. Not with revenge. Just with a simple, final refusal to play along. Now, I'm in a new city. A new space. With people who don't know me as Jesse's brother. And for the first time, that feels like freedom. He's rebuilding now, for real this time. Maybe he'll figure it out. Maybe he won't. But this time, it's not on me. And that changes everything.